Who are you? How did you get to where you are? And you're on, my friend.
Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Brewer, and I like to start my story by saying I was born on a chicken farm in rural Missouri. I start there because I had fairly humble beginnings and came from a place that I really didn't like in a lot of ways, but we had an insatiable hunger. So when I had the opportunity to go to college on a full ride scholarship, just studied everything. I was really interested in philosophy and deep questions, very interested in physics and how the universe works, and was very interested in dance and theater and martial arts and doing things with my body. And during that time, as a young adult, I stumbled onto the world of chaos and complexity and started training as a complexity scientist, which really just means, in a nutshell, that I was interested in how patterns form and how interdependencies work for things in the real world. But it wasn't long before I was in a graduate program studying material science and learning about the intricacies of little molecules and how they interact with each other. When someone came and gave a talk about the importance of clouds in the global climate system and how much we can learn by studying clouds while looking at them through satellites from space, which had two really powerful effects on me. One was realizing that there are basic questions in atmospheric science that are still not answered, whereas in a field like physics, almost all of the really important questions were addressed and answered 100 years ago. So this idea that we can make fundamental important contributions as a young scholar in an area that seemed so important just really had an allure. And the other was the Earth. It's just beautiful from space. So when you're looking at satellites, through satellites looking at the Earth, there's this very powerful thing called the overview effect of becoming transformed psychologically and even spiritually through the connection to the way that the Earth looks. It's just so beautiful. And so I ended up becoming an Earth system scientist. All that really means in practical terms is that I learned how the different processes and dynamics of the Earth interact with each other to create holistic patterns of behavior. How the ice at the polar caps relates to the circulation of the oceans, to the formation of clouds, to the movements of continents. And while I was studying these things, I had a front row seat to seeing just how much ecological harm and degradation is occurring, which drove me deep into depression and grief and caused me to drop out of my PhD program in atmospheric science. I was then studying at the University of Illinois and went off on my own to independently study the cognitive and behavioral sciences. The reason for this was that I was talking to a friend who said, that the big problems in the world that are not being addressed are largely because of issues of perception, mental models that people have, the values and norms of their cultures. And my friend who was studying the cognitive anthropology of religion said, well, Joe, if that's what you're interested in, you should go study cognitive science. And so I gave myself what I like to informally call a PhD from Joe University, because I don't have a PhD, but I spent about 2 years reading about 80 books, 400 research articles, all across the cognitive, behavioral, and social sciences. And I ended up getting hired by a place in Berkeley, California called the Rockridge Institute, founded by George Lakoff, doing cognitive linguistics work, basically studying how the human mind creates meaning and applying it to politics and social movements. And so flash forward, after about 15 years of doing work, applying all these different kinds of knowledge, we've come to a place now where most of what I do is a combination of on-the-ground regenerative work, restoring watersheds and rivers and soils and forests, together with the community organizing work that enables us to cooperate and create local living economies at the scale of entire landscapes. And so a lot of my work now is in the realm of regenerative design and the idea that it's possible to regenerate the Earth. I've become the author, or I'm now the author of the book, The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth, which explores how to do this in some detail. And it's a mixture of everything from grief and trauma healing through to reforestation practices and permaculture, mixed with pro-social processes of creating effective groups. And so that's just a flavor of me and the kind of work that I do. What I want to tell you about now is what happened to me when I understood the state of the world today, and which I'll go a little bit into in a moment, as I chose to become a father and bring a child into the world. So I'm someone who studied Earth system science. I understand ecological collapse as well as just about anyone. So I understand the risks and the threats that we're facing. And so it was a very serious issue for me to decide to have a child, understanding the risks and the dangers that my child, my beautiful daughter, who's now about to turn 6 years old, the dangerous future she's being born into. And so one of the things that we're doing now is learning how to create healing and harmony between humans and the rest of their environments at the scale of entire landscapes, at the scale of watersheds, coastal estuaries, mountain ranges, the Great Plains, places where we can create regional economies that are integrated with local culture and local ecology. Now, why is it that I care so much about doing this? Because, as I said before, I understand the seriousness and the sobriety of our current planetary predicament. A basis of my work is to understand how collapse processes occur, how there can be a stable dynamic order or a behavior for a living system. And then as we move beyond some critical thresholds, that order and capacity to self-organize breaks down and falls apart. And so a lot of what I'm interested in now has to do with planetary scale collapse patterns. And a framework that I find really helpful is the framework of planetary boundaries developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center. A planetary boundary, in brief, is a process of the entire living Earth that enables the planet to maintain homeostasis, relative stability of its climate and its biosphere at the scale of the entire planet. And so when a group of Earth system scientists got together, about 3,000 Earth system scientists, and they asked themselves, what are these planetary processes that there's some boundary where if we cross that boundary, we lose the ability to have stable planetary systems, which means we lose the ability to have a planetary civilization. And they identified 9. These planetary boundaries are things like the circulation of fresh water, or climate change and carbon dioxide emissions, land system change, which is turning complex ecosystems into degraded environments, the loss of biodiversity, the ozone layer, and so on. And they identified 9. And then they said, well, if there are 9, with our current level of knowledge, and this was in the year 2013, at our current level of knowledge, how many have we crossed? And they published a paper that came out in 2015. Remember, if we cross even 1, we lose the ability to have stable planetary systems and a global civilization. And based on the best information they had at the time, by 2015, we had already crossed 4. We had crossed the boundary for climate change, land system change, biosphere integrity, which is biodiversity loss or the rate of extinction, and geochemical cycles of nitrogen and phosphorus, which are used in industrial agriculture. We'd crossed the boundary on 4. Now in 2022, just a few years later, they've added 3 more. So we've now crossed 7 of the 9. What this means in practical terms is that we are deep in ecological overshoot, and we are right in the middle of a planetary scale collapse process that is only intensifying and accelerating, and is going to get much more intense in the next few decades, with much of the intensity beginning in the next few years. It's in the context of this knowledge that it was difficult for me to bring a child into the world, knowing that it's very likely that human population will reach a peak and start to plummet and reduce the human population in the next 20 to 30 years when my daughter is a young adult. And that it's actually possible that humans could go extinct by the end of this century. While the likelihood is still low of humans going extinct, even a low probability is just too much of a risk to even consider. So now the work that I do is to help people around the world learn how to regenerate the Earth. Back in the end of 2019, I started writing the chapters of a book, The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And instead of publishing the book, I decided that I would give it away for free so that it could get out into the world more quickly. And on social media, I put out an invitation. Who would like to join a study group to read the chapters of my book? We'll call the study group Earth Regenerators. 6 months later, there were 2,000 people on Earth Regenerators. It was a free, open access learning community. To this day, now it has more than 4,300 members. It's open access, completely free to join. It's not an organization, it's a community. And the purpose of Earth Regenerators initially was to share the chapters of my book and to show that it's possible to regenerate the Earth. But then, after a few months, we started building capacities to share leadership and distribute governance and self-organize many different groups of activity. And then we started raising money to buy very degraded land and convert it into community demonstration sites and community commons, where I live in Barichara, Colombia. We also raised money to support local projects and create tapestries of collaboration that operate and that succeed at the landscape scale. So this work has continued to evolve and grow to the point now where my partner Penny and I are seeking to activate bioregions, which is large-scale, landscape-scale capacities, places where humans could live in a sustainable way at the scale of watersheds, coastal estuaries, and other large-scale landscape features. And we're activating these landscapes by bringing models of cooperation and how to develop the emotional capacities to be in a group and the social capacities to work together as a group using a framework called pro-social, together with the tools of Common Land Foundation, which is an organization that works on large-scale landscape restoration, to create landscape funds and partnerships for creating collective visions and collective action at these large scales, and to create bioregional learning centers, which are basically core learning ecosystems where local people come together and share what they're learning and learn how to collaborate to map and evolve and guide the direction of development for their local economy and their local landscapes to become local living economies in harmony with the rest of nature. And because of what is happening at the planetary scale, we know that time is very limited to set this in motion. So we've set the goal that during the year 2023, in the next year, we will try to help activate at least 100 bioregions. Bioregions can be defined in different ways, and they range in number from between about 500 on the low end to 2,000 or 3,000 at the high end. And 1,000 landscapes would represent somewhere between a third and a half of the land area of the planet that doesn't include Antarctica, the areas where humans currently are able to habitate the land. So about a third of that land, which would be enough if we had 1,000 landscapes doing this work, that would be able to change the trajectory of the entire planet and begin regenerating the Earth. And so what we're doing now is we're currently working with 8 bioregions. We've been doing this work specifically for about 2 months. So I'm working within one of the bioregions in Barichara, Colombia, where we've been working now for about 3 years. And we've added 7 more. And our goal is to get to 100 by the end of 2023, creating learning exchanges, social supports, and distributed ways of governing and sharing funding across all of these landscapes so that we can learn together how to restore soils, how to protect biodiversity, how to create different kinds of economic models, and how to collaborate with each other at the scales that are needed to be able to do this work. And so what I want to share with you today is, first, at every scale of this work, up to the scale of integrated landscapes, it has been demonstrated to work in different places around the world. What has not been demonstrated is how to create a network of these landscape scale projects that might organize at the continental scale. So in South America, where I am, to organize along the Andes Mountains and the Amazon River basins, which is 200 rivers that form the Amazon basin, to be able to collaborate at the scale of an entire continent, one landscape to another. So the next level is to teach a lot of people and create learning exchanges for a lot of people. How do we do this at the landscape scale, while at the same time spreading landscape collaborations to the continental scale so that this can grow to the planetary scale? We want to get to 1,000 landscapes by 2030, which means we need to engage about 100 in the next year to get the process going with enough momentum to succeed. So I wanted to share this with you to give you a sense that there are people out there, we talk to them on a daily basis, who are taking very seriously our planetary predicament, are not falling into greenwashing or simplistic techno-fix kinds of solutions, and are working to do the deep, holistic healing work to be able to collaborate at these landscape scales and at the same time to form networks of collaboration at continental scales. And that this is the work we need to do, all of us, for the rest of our lives, because this is work that's going to need to continue for the next 200 to 300 years to stabilize and restore the health of the entire planet. So that's what I came to share with you today.